Good morning, everyone. There's a beautiful quote that says, write your grievances in sand and your gratitude in stone. You know, sometimes people have petty grievances that they shouldn't even write in sand. But sometimes you have legitimate grievances. And Yosef is the ultimate example who had a very legitimate grievance with his brothers. They threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery. He spent 12 years in a prison, plus a year as a slave, 13 years in Egypt. Not such easy years, as a result of his brother's actions. And yet, he forgives them in a very magnanimous and very compassionate way. And he's a real example of writing your grievances in sand and your gratitude in stone. But there are three magical words that Joseph says, not this week, but next week, when his brothers are afraid that he's going to take revenge. He says three of the most beautiful words in the Torah. He says, Hatachat Elokim Ani. Am I in the place of God? Who am I to judge? That's God's business. You may have had evil plans to hurt me, but you don't run the world, and I surely don't run the world. God runs the world. And whatever God intended, that's what happened. You meant ill. You tried to harm me by sending me into slavery. But God had a bigger plan. He wanted to make me viceroy of Egypt. So he says, am I in the place of God? And the Medrash takes these three words deeper. The Medrash say, when was the last time we found the same three words, am I in the place of God? So if you go back to Parshas Vayigash, when Rachel couldn't have children, she turned to her husband Yaakov and said, Yaakov, give me children or else I'm dead. I can't live without children. And it says Yaakov got angry at his wife. The anger of Yaakov flared up against his wife. And he said to her, Hatachas Elokim Ani, am I in the place of God? Same question. That I withheld the fruit of your womb? What do you want from me? God did this. So God says the Medrash to Yaakov, that's the way you talk to your wife who's in pain? She's crying out, she has no children, and you rebuke her and say, am I in the place of God? What do you want from me? I promise you that her child, Rachel's child, when she eventually has her first child, Joseph, one day will teach everyone how these same three words should be used. Not spoken in anger, but spoken in compassion and comfort. Yaakov used it to rebuke his wife. Am I in the place of God? What do you want from me? And Yaakov says, Hashem says, I'll show you how these words should be used. The way Yosef lovingly says to brothers, am I in the place of God? And those three words are so powerful. We could live our whole lives by these three words. When things happen to us, the ups, the downs, we question sometimes why. And to have Yosef's faith that God has a plan, and I trust his plan. And I may not see it right away. It may take, in Yosef's case, 13 years to see the plan. But I trust there's a plan and I will see it. I'll just tell you a story. There's a rabbi, his name is Rabbi Yoel Gold. He makes very inspirational videos about divine providence. You could find his videos on YouTube, very popular. And he finds these very inspirational stories. He makes short films about it. So he writes a story that he was thinking that he's getting such good feedback from these stories, he wants to make it as a school curriculum. That he would write a whole curriculum based on each movie, the teachers would show it, and then they would teach a lesson plan. So he needed funding for it, so he had a friend from his yeshiva days. He lives in California, he had a friend in Brooklyn. He called his friend, he said, I want to get together with you. He's a wealthy guy, maybe he would support it. The guy says, okay, when do you want to come to town? He says, I'll be in New York on this day, maybe we'll have lunch. He says, fine. They pick a day, a time, and he says, where do you want to meet? So the guy from Brooklyn says, I'll meet you in this restaurant. He says he shows up to the meeting. He says the morning of the meeting, he Googles where the restaurant is. He sees they have two locations. This particular had two locations in two parts of Brooklyn. So he calls his friend and says, which one did you mean? He said, I meant the one in Flatbush on this and this street. He said, fine. Comes to the meeting. It's a lunch meeting. As they're sitting and eating, he sees a bunch of girls, religious-looking girls in school uniforms walk in to get lunch. And he sees they spot him. He's a famous guy if you watch his films, so they noticed him. And he sees they're talking, and he's thinking, I hope they don't come over to me. I'm trying to fundraise from this guy. I don't need any distractions. And he's telling his friend about his films and what he's thinking of doing. He needs funding for it to promote this. The girls leave the restaurant. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman walks in, a religious-looking woman, and she spots him and starts walking towards his table. And he's thinking, please don't distract me. I'm working towards my pitch, to get the funding for this movie. I don't need anyone bothering me, stopping me. I guess he gets people coming up to him. The woman walks right over to the table, and he says, are you Rabbi Yoel Gold? He says, yeah. He says, I just had to come here because the girls told me you were here, and I just had to tell you something. He says, okay, what do you want to tell me? He says, I want to tell you that we show all your movies in the school. And I have to tell you, the girls are so inspired by your films. I could see the way it strengthens their faith in God and their trust in divine providence. And I could see how after they watch a movie, they pray with more kavanah. And I have to just tell you to keep up your work, because what you're doing is having such an impact. I could just see it in the hundreds of girls in my school. It's tremendous work. She goes on and on. So thank you for your holy work. Keep it up. It's such an inspiration. And she walks away. Rabbi Yoel says, I didn't have to say another word. She gave the best sales pitch I could have ever made. I looked at the guy and said, listen, I didn't prearrange this, I promise you. I didn't even know which restaurant I was going to this morning. But by divine providence, Hashem brought him to the location of that restaurant on that day, right around the corner from this religious girls' school, and everything that had to be said was said. Sometimes our best laid plans don't even come close to the plans that Hashem has for our lives. But we have to have faith and trust in Hashem's plan. And like Yosef says, Hashem runs the world, we don't.